friends, this is your host Jyotsna Sharma welcoming you back to another interesting session of EVM, where every vote matters and every voice matters. Well, elections are coming closer in India, and there is one thing that is to be discussed today, which would be regarding nationalism. Yes, today we are going to speak about nationalism or resurgence of nationalism all across the world. We understand from Indian perspective, it has become the hot topic to be discussed, but with our esteemed panel of guests today, we are going to have a discussion, not a debate, about the resurgence of nationalism all over the world. And to have that discussion, we have our esteemed guest here. Again, we have Mr. Dhiren Mehta. Dhirenji, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Mr. Mehta is an astute political observer, as you know pretty well. And then we have our esteemed guest, Mr. Francois Gautier. Welcome, sir. Francois Gautier is a French political writer and a journalist based in India since 1971. He has served as the South Asian correspondent for the French language newspaper Le Figaro. Gautier is the founder of the Foundation for Advancement of Cultural Ties, which is also called as FACT, an NGO dedicated to Indian history. And it is such a beautiful pride to have such esteemed guest who has made India his nation, and he speaks about the cultural values there in India. Sir, we are proud to have you here. Thank you so much. So, with our today's discussion about the resurgence of nationalism, Francois, I want to begin from you. You being a writer, you must have written a lot about things. What is your perspective and what is your definition of nationalism?
Well, there is true nationalism and there is, excesses of nationalism. I think true nationalism started where, countries like Italy or France, wanted to get away from the monarchy. In France, as you know, there was a revolution, and that revolution ushered democracy for France. The idea of freedom, brotherhood, and democracy started in France and took slowly over the whole of Europe. So this is true nationalism. And of course, there were excesses of nationalism later. People like Hitler, who in the name of nationalism killed 6 million Jews because he thought that the so-called Aryan race, the Germans, was the purest in the world, and Jews, were polluted race. So we have to look at both the essence of nationalism, the true nationalism, the awakening of nations, to their pride and to their soul and to their culture, and nationalism when it goes overboard, and commits a lot of excesses, and atrocities, And I think today we can see there's a resurgence of nationalism in Europe, particularly due to immigration.
Okay, it's only not Europe. In fact, I must say it's America also here. We're sitting here, and I believe nationalism has some uprising here as well. And definitely from Indian perspective, it is always an evergreen topic to discuss. Not just that, the passion always mounts high. I mean, I will take that little views from Mr. Dhiren Mehta. Dhirenji, from Indian perspective, what is your take about resurgence of nationalism? Do you think it is resurging now, or it has always been prominent?
So, from a purely Indian context, I think we have to look at it in a little different way. For us, the nation and country are two different things.
Right.
Because if you look at our heritage, in India, nation has always been what we believe in the values. Because we never had a philosophy of a boundary defining a country or the nation. Right? The country boundary is a newer phenomenon. So from our perspective, the nation is our heritage or a values, and that's what the nation is. So when we talk about resurgence of nationalism, from an Indian context, it is more about our values, our heritage, because if you look at it, we talk about the whole world as our kutumb.
Right. Okay.
So when we think of whole world as our kutumb, then there is no question of defining a boundary, physical boundary that draws a country, and then we talk nationalism in the context of country alone. So that's what the Indian context is. So when we talk about resurgence of nationalism, we are more talking about resurgence of our heritage and cultural values that has probably diminished in last several decades or even centuries.
Okay. Francois, you have stayed in India for a long time. I mean, I'll come back to that and discuss about that. But let's speak about a little bit about the narrative of nationalism being misused from the present perspective. You did speak about wherever you want to speak about, and of course we'll discuss about India definitely. EVM currently is focusing on Indian politics as of now for some days. So
you have to differentiate between the political leadership and what the masses feel. Now, I think in Europe, among the masses, the ordinary masses, there is an unease, and there is a, kind of dislike of the immigration, the heavy immigration that is coming to Europe. I'm not talking about the political leaders. I'm talking about the people.
So the people are disliking?
I think the people, in Europe, are kind of fed up with immigration. In my country, in France,
right,
we see that, you work all your life, and you get a, very meager retirement. And these people come to France, and the French government welcomes them. Now in France, there are not enough French people now. So if you have, the more you have children, the more the French state pays you.
Okay.
So the people, they take a lot of social security benefits.
Right.
And so among the Frenchmen, not me because I don't live in France, but I know that among the middle and lower class French people, there is a resentment against these immigrants.
So
because they're taking away the benefit that the French people should have, having worked all their lives hard enough.
Does it pertain to any kind of immigrants, or particularly, I mean, there is a legal section
there's a
of
problem with the
immigrants
Muslim
or
immigrants, of course. There's a problem
you're
with
speaking about the
Muslim
Muslim, okay.
because they don't integrate, whereas, the other immigrants that came earlier into France, like the Italians, the Armenians, so many came to France, they integrated themselves.
Okay, so it's basically on the level of race and religion, there is more demarcation, and there's a like and dislike.
It's a question of bread and butter. It's not a question of race and rice. It's a question of bread and butter. I mean, I think the ordinary people, they don't see so much about religion or race. They think about, the bread and butter. So that's how they vote. So the politicians don't always, are in touch with the masses. So they don't always understand, the feeling of the masses. There is a kind of gap between, not in the US, but in Europe, there's a kind of
I mean,
gap.
there's an absolutely different perspective here in the US. If they speak about, it's not about any religion per se or a race, but what they are emphasizing more is between the legal and the illegal immigrants, where where President Trump is, coming up as a nationalist leader. In fact, Dhirenji, I would want to you to comment on that basically,
So nationalism in context of different countries have a different, because of the current context and current, contemporary issues, has variations.
Right.
So in Germany, in France, there has been lot of influx of asylum seekers coming from the Middle Eastern country. Right. And as Francois rightly said, they do not assimilate with the society, and they want their identity and their way of life is definitely creating lot of backlash within the masses. In fact, what happened 4 years back on the New Year Eve in Germany, where large number of women were actually molested on the road in public places by large group of asylum or those
seekers
who came, right? And the crimes have increased significantly. And that has also happened if you look at the Nordic region. In the Sweden, there is a lot of backlash on that. But I will also give you a perspective of UK, where I have lived 3 years. And even before where this issue started, right? I was there in 98 to 2002, and I saw huge amount of divide between people from especially Pakistan or some of the other countries, like keeping themselves separate from the mainstream, and there were a lot of tension between, I could see. So that has, in fact, there is a term called Paki created, which is used as slur, because there is all that is a divide between the communities there. So the point I'm bringing is that yes, I think the country-wise there is a different context to it. Coming to the US, the nationalism is because there has been influx of illegal immigrant seeker, not as much from Middle East, because US is pretty physically separated, geographically separated, so it's difficult for the Middle Eastern to come in here, but coming from more of a South America and other places. and there is a backlash of that because they come here, they get all the opportunities, and it is creating problem. It is also, in fact, unfortunately reflecting on those who are coming legally here, because overall there is a pushback on immigrants.
Well, okay. Thank you for your view on that, Francois. If we speak about nationalism and patriotism, do you think there is any difference between both, or they're all the way same?
No, it's interesting to make a comparison between China and India, because the Chinese are very nationalist.
Okay.
Very nationalist. You know that. You know the Chinese actually are very proud. You know, and even with the U.S., there's a lot of tension because the Chinese do not accept any imposition. You know, and they feel that their interests come first.
Mm-hmm.
Now, India lacks nationalism in my opinion. Because India was colonized for so long.
Right.
You know, by different countries, finally by the British, you know, for nearly 3 centuries, you know. There's a lack of pride in being Indian. I feel as a lover of India, as someone who's, has a outside look, because I'm born a Frenchman, I'm an educated Catholic.
Right.
So as an outsider, I feel that one thing that India lacks is nationalism. And when you have nationalism, everything flows. I'm not talking about excess of nationalism. I'm talking about the right amount of nationalism.
No, the right level of, yes.
Everything flows. Now, if you look at the U.S. before Trump, you know, the level of the U.S. excellence, whether it is in economics, whether it is in sports is a very important aspect
They've
of
been excelling
nationalism.
a lot
You know,
in Olympics and
people
all.
who are proud of their country do well for their country.
Right.
You know, in the Olympics, if you look at the U.S. in the last, 60, 70 years, they've done extremely well.
Absolutely.
China was nowhere in sports. You know, the Chinese, when Nixon went there in 1971, they could only play table tennis. You know,
Right.
Chinese is one of the top sports nations.
Absolutely.
You know, in 40 years now they're excelling in track and field and swimming. You know,
Right.
so nationalism is very important for a nation, and India lacks nationalism. Look at India in sports. You know, it's nowhere in football, nowhere in basketball, nowhere in track and
Well,
field.
I would differ here, Francois,
Yeah, I know
because
you would,
there are
but
infrastructural
my point is
facilities,
very
there's
valid.
a political misuse,
No,
of the things.
No, not at all, not at all, not at all. India lacks nationalism because India was colonized. So if you look at Indian children, the first thing they do is they go abroad and they settle abroad. The best brains
Right.
of India go abroad, particularly to the US, you know.
Right.
Some of the top people in the US are Indians, you know, and it's a
Absolutely.
loss to India. It's a total loss to India because
True.
they're Indian. You're born Indian, aren't you?
Absolutely, but then I feel
So
there
what
are
are you doing here?
No, that's what I'll tell you. See, there is dearth of amenities, infrastructure, there is dearth of growth.
No,
There are
that's
a
not
lot
an
of things.
excuse.
So
That
we
is
would
not
differ
an
there.
excuse.
We would
There's a
differ
lack
on
of
that.
pride in being Indian.
So Francois,
No,
I agree
with
with
the-
you in terms of, and I absolutely believe that we have lack of patriotism in India. I absolutely believe in that.
I mean, see, I was speaking about difference between nationalism and patriotism, but according
I
to
think we got
Francois,
diverted into
I
that.
believe
It's
it's
a
all the more
friendly debate.
same.
It's a
We
friendly
got
debate.
No,
digressed.
no,
right?
definitely. It's all the more same, I believe, nationalism and patriotism.
I
that you're
think
saying.
patriotism gives
I mean,
rise
Indians
to
do say we are patriots, but I believe that's what you're saying, that they are not as much as they should have
Indians are
been.
not proud to be Indians, and you are producing children who are just clones because they learn only about Western mathematics,
So-
Western history, about Shakespeare. They read novels which are bestsellers in the U.S. They have no clue who Kalidasa is, one of the greatest poets ever.
Exactly.
Kalidasa,
Exactly.
has been compared by Western writers like Romain Rolland as great as as Shakespeare.
So that's where I would
No,
agree
we-
with you.
No,
So Francois,
Aurobindo is one of the greatest philosophers ever,
So-
is he taught in India? No. You have no idea about, Indian painters and Indian architecture. So I see that, they come to, I live partly in Auroville near Pondicherry, so which is a very, innovative
It was
place.
a colonized area, though.
A lot of houses, a lot of new houses, there are a lot of different materials, so Indian architect students come there to do, their internship,
Right.
Look at the architecture which is done in India. It's a bad copy of what we did in the West, in France, 50, 60 years ago. There is no Indian architecture was so great. There's so
It
much.
has
I
been
mean, you go
always
to a
excellent.
village house in Tamil Nadu with the pillars and the inner courtyard.
Sure.
It's so great. But there's a total, disconnect in India between the past, the roots, and today. So as a result, what we
Francois,
see,
I believe this has got a lot to do with the politics.
No, so let me let me interrupt. So Francois, let me intervene
I don't want to. I mean, it's not a debate we are discussing, but I believe when you say about
I have a different perspective.
I will listen from you also, Dhirenjit.
Yeah, let me share my perspective.
Sure.
Right? So you look at, and I strongly believe that Pakistanis are far more patriots than Indians. Pakistanis are far more dedicated or committed to their country.
That's because of Islam.
I'll come to that.
Not because of
I'll come to that. So Indians and Pakistanis had the same, at least they were both colonized and they separated and got independent at the same time. But today, if you look at Pakistanis, they are far more dedicated. So if there is anything against Pakistan, the number of people that will go for demonstration here or write petition are far more higher than Indians. And the reason for that is that they have created some identity for themselves, whether you like it or not. They have created an identity for themselves that they feel they belong to. I think India lacks that sense of identity. Indians lack that sense of identity because the way we have been taught in our schools, we have been taught from the prism of Britishers' history. So we only think of India as in terms of what Akbar did and what Taj Mahal as our icon, but we do not have as much deep appreciation because we are not taught that about temples that were created 1,000 years back. Our heritage goes
Francois
far
has
back.
a very valid point there when he speaks about we were colonized.
But even
And
so was
then
Pakistan.
all our
Pakistan is a good example because their identity is Islamic. So I mean,
we have to create our identity from our heritage.
See, from religious perspective,
Not religious, I'm talking about heritage.
He's speaking about religion.
Agreed. So they created because they wanted to
So I think China is a better comparison because the Chinese, China and India are two superpowers. In terms of numbers, they're nearly equal. They compete for each other. So the Chinese are much prouder because they were not colonized. And they have a sense of history. They have a sense of even today the communist leadership. They use ancient leaders like Tao, spiritual leaders like Tao to fashion their political and economical thinking of conquering the world. Now in India you have such great people. I talk about Kalidasa, but there's so many others. But they're not taught in your school. So as a result, you have children who grow up not feeling connected to their Indianness. I'm a Frenchman. I'm connected to my French identity. I mean, Napoleon and all the great people that we think fashioned France. But it's not true of Indian students.
So I have a question. Do you think it is about too much of secularism? Secular country, India being a secular country, and too much of emphasis on secularism.
But that's also colonization. Secularism is just a leftover of the British who try to equate everybody in India on the same footing. Whether they were Hindus were actually 80 to 90% in those days, or a small minority like the Sikhs, who were 2-3%. So the British sense of fair play, which is not bad actually, has been carried over to Nehru. Was just a Britisher. Do you feel it is an
excess of secularism that has percolated, or it has spread it out all over India?
It is an abuse secularism more than excess, because even
is it an abuse secularism by the politicians?
By the politicians, right? By the bureaucrats and politicians. And I'll tell you why it is abused. Because if you were to say that secularism is used for benefiting minority, they are not benefited. They are not benefited by that. They have been kind of used for political gains, but where have they benefited? Few within that obviously taken advantage. So I think it is abused secularism rather than the true secularism. A true secularism treats everybody at equal, and nation rises above the religion, but at the same time they do not give up their roots and their heritage. I think what is happening in India, if you talk about a king that stood against Mughals, is treated as, oh, he is a saffron, right? Talk too much about Shivaji and you would be viewed as if you are saffronized on. When you talk about, for example, there was a talk about when Smriti Irani ji, when she was the education minister, she introduced Sanskrit in the school, and look at the backlash that was there. Now in Germany, and I remember very much series about saffronization of our education because Sanskrit was added as an optional subject, not mandatory, optional subject.
I remember.
And same 3 years back before that date, and I have actually posted that on my Facebook, had done a show saying that in Germany they are teaching Sanskrit and in our country we are not teaching Sanskrit. But when so anyway, the point I'm making is that there is too much of whitewashing our heritage just because we don't want to offend certain classes. That's abuse secularism.
So from Indian perspective, let's speak about, elections are coming, and when we speak about too much of secularism or
Abuse secularism.
abused secularism per se, you say. And Francois, you've been in India since 1971, How do you feel a whole shift can happen, where this resurgence can come? I believe
it's coming. I think it's coming slowly.
It's coming?
I think Mr. Modi brought that, nationalism on the forefront of the Indian scene. He's the first leader who actually, spoke passionately about being Indian. And I think it's coming slowly, and the social media has been a great tool in,
Sure.
propping up nationalism in India. The feeling that I'm proud to be Indian, I'm proud to be born in India. This is a great country, the very ancient history,
Right.
that produced, many remarkable discovery, whether it is a zero, whether it's a chess, whatever,
Right.
So of course that feeling can be dangerous because it can turn into xenophobia. We can see in China that the nationalism of China turns to xenophobia, an excess of nationalism. The Chinese think that they can conquer the world and dominate the world. So this is an excess of nationalism, but India has not reached that level yet. So it needs
India
to create
has never
nationalism.
invaded any country
Never.
in the history, and it will never invade. If we go by the principles, ahimsa paramo dharma. India being a Hindu nation primitively, where the whole origins came in. Of course, after that there was a Mughal invasion and everything, people influx and everything happened. I understand. So with that principle of ahimsa paramo dharma, India would not believe offending any country. They will defend themselves, though.
And with Vasudeva Kutumbakam, right? That's what I said in the beginning. When we treat the whole world as a kutum, we are only, I think, Indian or the Hindus want to spread the values and not impose the values, right? Because first of all, we believe that gods come in different forms. We don't have one God. So accepting one more God, be it Christ or be it Allah, is nothing new for us. Nothing new for us. Nothing new for us.
Hindu dharma is secular from that perspective. Right. With 3,600 Devi and Devtas, they term everything as Devi and Devta, whether it's a tree, it's a cow, or an animal, or any scriptures, anything. There are different kind of forms when they provide divinity, from that perspective.
One more
so they are very diverse.
Accepting one more form of worship or one more God is nothing. We have lived with that.
But then again, you are saying it is resurging now. So the role of this NDA government from that perspective, I understand a lot of opposition forces, parties, Mahagathbandhan Sarkar forming up now. They are teaming up, that Mahagathbandhan is upcoming. So in that pursuit, one side is NDA and then is this Mahagathbandhan. You might have, studied it equally being in India right now. What is your view? Do you feel that nationalistic agenda is kept at bay by the Mahagathbandhan people?
Yes. I think Indians have an inferiority complex, particularly Hindus, because Christians don't have it, Sikhs don't have it, Muslims don't have it. So Hindus have an inferiority complex created by, a lot of suffering at the hands of colonizers.
I would differ here, Francois. I am a Hindu, practicing Hindu. Where is inferiority? I believe for Hindus, they are more open. They have open arms to welcome people.
I stand by my statement. There's an inferiority complex that,
what kind of inferiority complex?
Being a Hindu is, a handicap and, is not something to be put forward.
So I'll extend what he's saying.
The Muslims don't have, the Muslims are proud to be Muslim. I drove from Paris to Pondicherry by car when I first came. And my friend was a Muslim guy from Morocco, French Muslim. And in whichever Muslim country we crossed, whether it was, Iran or Pakistan or Afghanistan, he would say Salam Alaikum, and all the doors were open because he was a Muslim, though he was different, absolutely couldn't speak their language. So this is not truth of Hindu. If you say to a Hindu in New York, Oh Namah Shivaya, he will probably, turn away or slap you, right?
No, I think that's a little bit of.
Francois,
but I'll extend what he's saying.
I stand.
No, I'll extend what he's saying.
You may be standing by your views, but there are different people.
No,
with
let me
views.
extend what he's saying.
Okay, Dhirenji,
right?
let's
so
hear from you.
More than inferiority complex, I think there is an inferiority complex, but I think there is a lot of political correctness, if I were to use that term. Lot of political correctness, or what will other think if I put my Hindu identity, which others don't feel that way, right? So for us to do tilak and go out, we feel little uncomfortable, right? But for a Sikh guy to wear turban and all the 24 days, 24 by 7, he doesn't feel that how will he be viewed. So we don't feel comfortable wearing a tilak or wearing a bhagwa cloth and go to office, right? So I'll tell you one thing. That is the level of whether you call it inferiority complex, or we want to be
exceptions.
We want to be accepted.
Exceptions.
We want to be accepted by everybody. I think that
But you both are exceptions. The majority of Hindus. I've traveled a lot in the States. You go to any big universities in America. There's so many Hindu students there.
Yeah.
The only thing they want is to melt in the American life. They don't.
They want to be accepted rather than.
I've given yoga and pranayama and meditation,
Right.
and Ayurveda to the world. They don't give a damn. They just want to melt in the American way of life. They're lost to India and they're lost to America because they carry no Indianness. 95% of Hindus in America, at least.
So I'll give you a live example, right?
All
I'll
right.
give you an example. When we talk about, let's say, cow protection, most Hindus don't feel comfortable talking that with their friends here because they feel, they will think, it is something obnoxious. Why can't you tell your?
I think there is a political terrorization of the word Hindu itself.
No, but why can't you
They've
feel
terrorized
comfortable
the word
but
Hindu.
in
If
this
somebody-
country? Why a Hindu man or a woman or a child, right, in going to college can't talk about cow protection in our country in the context that what is wrong if you can have dog or
I
cat?
think the political leaders, I definitely should not give my opinion here, of course I am taking from you, but then with the political leaders, how they are infusing the information or the,
I think it goes
sending the message to the masses.
The politicians emerge from the masses. Because masses have that view, it is a kind of vicious circle, right? So if masses think that politicians are talking rubbish, they will not survive. So
how long will it take for India to have a complete resurgence of
If Mr.
nationalism?
Modi comes back, for sure it will be faster. If the Congress comes back, it
will be downhill.
It will be a setback, to nationalism. India needs nationalism. Indians need to be proud of their culture. They have no clue about their own history. What
Right.
you are teaching in Indian school, the history books that are there, are relying on theories made by the British, like the Aryan invasion, that white people came to India, they conquered, the blacker people and the Dravidians and the tribal, they imposed the caste system, they imposed the Hindu religion, so the black people went down to the south, where you find them, the Dravidians, it's been proved totally false, and then you're still teaching your kids that, so.
So do you feel ever for the last 70 years, the way the India got its independence, with the Congress governments in position and power right from the beginning with Mr. Jawaharlal Nehru, Prime Minister Nehru?
Mr. Nehru was a friend of the British, he was, he had qualities, but he just borrowed whatever the British left and clamped it on India. And India has, India had got its own ancient systems, of governance, of medicine, of judiciary. But Mr. Nehru just took the British thing and clamped it. Education, judiciary, considered everything. So now you have a, president who is like the viceroy of India, and you have, governors who have no power, and you have a system, education system that's totally British in its outlook and produce British people. Now, of course, Britain is not a great country like it used to be. America is the, greatest country in the world, so they come to America. The greatest brain drain in the world is that of the Hindus. All your spelling, I don't know what it's called, spelling bees, they're only Hindus. Are winning it,
I want to ask you a question on that. In fact, it is absolutely out of context from one perspective. With the reservation of minorities in the castes, lower castes, and how much role that excess reservation has got to play with the brain drain. When we speak about Hindus or say Indians moving out of the nation and the brain drain coming, the best and the brightest are coming out, where do you feel or how do you feel?
No, that's a side consequence, I think, Nehru did some good things, and one was, to uplift the Dalits and the lower classes and give them opportunities. But of course, like everything that the human being do, it gets into excesses. And today we see that, the Brahmins who actually have become the Dalits of India today. The Brahmins are people in India. I made a film, my foundation made a film on the Brahmins.
What is the film?
It's called The Brahmins, the Brahmins are the Dalits of India, yeah.
The Brahmins are the Dalits of India?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on YouTube. There must be at least 500,000 hits already.
Really?
So we interviewed, Brahmin priests in Karnataka who are paid, 800 rupees a month, 700 rupees a month. There are Dalits. The toilets in Delhi are cleaned by Dalits, by Brahmins. Sorry.
The toilets are cleaned by the Brahmins?
The Sulabh toilets is Brahmins.
Sulabh toilets are Brahmins?
Yeah, it's cleaned by Brahmins. There are many coolies in the Delhi railway station which are Brahmins.
And there is nothing wrong. I mean, I don't think we can have that because they were born Brahmin.
No, but from being the exploiter now, the Brahmins
so
are become the
are you
exploiters.
speaking, because of the excess reservation, that, even what has happened, the politicians have misused it. There are rich Dalits. There are people who are already empowered, through these procedural reservations year after generation to generations. Now they are extremely rich.
Right. Dalits today have become,
and now they are powerful.
So what has happened, right?
And then
if you see Ambedkar,
I'll just frame the question there. So these people became too powerful. They got position, power, money, pelf, and everything.
Quite true.
And then of course the degradation of some higher, one Vyavastha people, the caste,
but it's
higher
not
caste
an
came
excuse
down.
for the brain drain. It can't be an excuse for the brain drain.
It cannot be an excuse for the brain drain, you are saying, Sir? Because if you speak that it's a brain drain has happened, my question was, has this to any extent played a role where people have moved on because of this caste?
Because you're born in a family, where you learn English naturally, where there's culture, where there's, so most of the people who come to the US come from that background, upper middle class, upper class, so can't be an excuse. The Dalits even today, they start with a handicap because they come from a poorer background, and even though their parents might have become rich or politicians, there hasn't that cultural background that most of you have. So I can't be an excuse. Sorry.
So I think Dalit reservation, right, or whatever, SC, ST reservation, etc., was needed. It was needed in a limited way where they see that as a incentive to perform. But I think, like we talked about, secularism has been abused. I think reservation system also have been abused by both politicians and those who are taking benefit of that. So that's the issue, unfortunately, that it has been politicized or lost. But I think it was needed. It was introduced by Ambedkar for 10 years. It kept extending. Maybe it is still needed to continue. But I think relying purely for your votes on that is what politicians have used to make it abuse the system.
He's right. Today it's become a political vote bank. And we see Mayavati, we see all these people, they use the Dalits in a very cynical manner just to get their votes.
Right.
But nevertheless, I do think from the Dalits to the Brahmin, there's a lack of nationalism in India, lack of knowledge of my inheritance, where I come from, my ancestors, my warriors, the fantastic women who have, all throughout Indian history, there have been fantastic women, warriors and queens. We have an exhibition on Aliyabai of Indore in our museum. She was adopted. She was not even a royal blood.
Aliyabai?
Devi
Aliyabai?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was adopted. Her husband died, her son died. And she became an extraordinary queen. At all levels. But if you're an Indian woman, and you're brought up in India, you hardly hear about people like that.
Right. No, see, for women, of course, they have not been,
the land of rape. India is the land of rape. And Indians themselves propagate that idea. I live in India for so long. I am married to an
rapes
Indian.
happen all over the world. Yes, but
how they more are in the US than in India, my dear. Proportionately, there are much more rape.
In India, definitely. See, the thing is, I don't know how much of
more rapes happen in Nordic countries, more in US, and that's what he's saying.
No, my question,
again, lack of nationalism.
Nationalism. How about patriarchy coming into picture there? with India?
Not much difference, you know. What's
So
the
there
difference?
is a difference, you know. I mean,
What's the difference? Tell
well,
me.
it's a diverted topic, though.
What's the difference?
No, my point is patriarchy, men ruling versus chauvinistic
Oh, patriarchy, not talking.
patriarchy. I'm not patriotism.
Okay, patriarchy.
See,
No, but it's wrong
My
for
point
India.
is
No,
that-
look.
see,
I'm-
patriarchy,
No,
the men ruling the
but
women.
no, but it's not
But the
true for
rape
India.
is
No,
a
it's
different
not true.
concept
Not true for
altogether.
Look
India.
at the Middle
Not
Eastern
true.
country. Even in this country, you know, when the voting was allowed, just 100 years back, in 1920,
understand.
women could start voting.
Indira Gandhi ruled India for 20 years like with an iron hand, you know.
Right.
Long before, you know, Margaret Thatcher came, long before, you know, Hillary Clinton came, you know. America never had an American president, you
I
know.
understand. We
And
had
Sonia
many
Gandhi-
first. Sarojini
Sonia Gandhi,
Naidu.
oh, let me tell, Sonia Gandhi was the absolute empress of India for 10 years, even though she was not elected prime minister. I have seen it with my own eyes, you know. I traveled to Pakistan, I met Benazir Bhutto twice, you know. I saw Benazir Bhutto sitting on a desk, you know, with 20 men, you know, standing up, you know, with deference. This comes from India. I saw in Bangladesh, you know, that Begum, I forgot the name, you know, same, you know, there have been in Bangladesh, an Islamic country, the last two prime ministers have been women.
Okay.
So
But my question is, how is
these are all
this?
cliches, you know, these are all cliches.
The thing is, you said that nationalism, because of this nationalism issue, there are more rapes happening in India.
No. That's
You
Never.
said that.
no,
What
no,
did you say?
never.
Rape capital. What does that
No,
mean?
I'm saying
were
that,
trying
you
to
know,
say.
Been projected as a rape
It's been
cracker.
projected by countries like the US, you know, or even in my country, France.
And you feel that
the land
Indians
where
are not
women are not
protecting it?
safe, you know. And I lived in India. I have known women traveling in India. Of course, you have to take precautions, especially in the north, you know. But it's a safe country. India is a safe country.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
what he
I,
said
I,
was
I
for me,
heard.
for a white
What
man,
he
for a
said is-
woman.
What
No,
he
no, I
said
got
is
his
it is
point.
projected, and
As
unfortunately, Indian media is also not
So
defending.
that's where you are saying that
Lack of
nationalism is not
patriotism,
there.
lack of
Patriotism is there.
patriotism,
I
lack
got
of
your point.
pride.
Okay. So here,
If I'm an Indian woman,
Francois
I'm
is
not a
saying-
woman, but if I'm an Indian woman, I would be proud to be an Indian woman.
absolutely.
Maybe
Here,
I should
Francois
change my
is
sex.
trying to say. No, I want to convey to my audience. Francois wants to say, all over the world, India is projected as a rape.
Capital.
Country where rapes do happen too much, and there's a wrong depiction. Why it is more prominently spread out all over? Because Indians do not take the defense or do not try to explain to the people of the world, no, that's not the case. Indian women are growing, and definitely that is a valid proof. There is a lot of growth in and the strength and the spirit of womanhood is very, very high right now in India, and I
has
definitely
always
agree.
been. It has always been.
Rani
During
Lakshmi Bai.
During Mahabharata, we
Absolutely.
had a lady ruling the country, the whole empire. During Mahabharata, so it
Lack
has
of
always been.
nationalism, my dear. Lack of nationalism.
Francois being, he has inherited India now, and he speaks about India's nationalism, and he's pained by it. He has his views. Why? Because he feels somewhere Indians lack that spirit to tell people of the world that they are more patriotic or more nationalistic than others. They are failing their role there, where they are not able to establish that fact that they can defend their nation and can say we are proud of our country, we are proud of our culture, we are proud of our religion. That's what you are trying to say, Francois, right?
Absolutely.
Francois, one more thing, and Dhirenjit, from you also. With the recent, whenever a terrorist attack happens, any kind of calamity that happens, be it Mumbai attacks, be it Mumbai blast, be it the recent Pulwama attack, how do you equate the terminology of nationalism or patriotism when these attacks happen? Is it is an enhanced patriotism, or it's a time-bound patriotism, or is it the spirit of patriotism or nationalism that comes to the fore?
So I think, unfortunately, in the context of India again, there is a spurt, but very temporary spurt very often. Our patriotism is when there is some terrorist attack happens, everybody wants government to act, right? But at the same time, when government is acting tough, right? What is the public support? When government is acting tough on the internal enemies that we have, and unfortunately our country has a lot of internal enemies, right? Those who talk about Tukde gang,
Right.
or those who are talking about separation of Kashmir and other. When government is acting against them, how much is people supporting them? Why people are not outright saying that we will vote for the party that talks about India's integrity first and nothing else matters to us, because unless our country is one, everything else will, if country is broken, what will happen? We will not even have as a one nation, we will not grow. So I think that is where we just go into spurt for nationalism, but that's again lack of patriotism.
So you're saying it is just the spurt of patriotism that comes during the
For us, patriotism is India-Pakistan match, or doing some Diwali celebration and eating some food. That's all our patriotism
so
is.
And the Republic Day celebration or the Independence Day celebration, selling the flags.
Cricket is the only area where Indians feel nationalism. Very unfortunate, because cricket is also a colonial legacy that is meant to be played in the cooler climates,
Well, it doesn't matter if we like a sport and if we are performing well, because Olympics, if you see the countries are performing, not all sports have come from that country. But the question is, it cannot be limited to just because when we play cricket.
No, but very important cricket, because we were talking about sport, and I think sport is very symbolic of how our nation.
So Francois, one question is there. You're speaking about cricket or anything. A lot of legacies. I mean, the British left it, and we are using. Indians are using. Do you think it is altogether in a disadvantage, or somehow Indians have benefited from that colonial rule? India was absolutely divided all over. I mean, India was
no, that's not true. I don't think so. I mean, all your great philosophers and sages have said that there's always something that united India. That it's also a British view of India that it was divided and the British united it. Maybe they did the railways, but the railways would have come anyway. But I don't think the British brought much to India. Actually, Sri Aurobindo wrote a book, on the foundations of Indian culture, which was written because there was a British critic famous in those days called Mr. Archer, who said there was nothing much of value in Indian culture, philosophy, writing, painting, architecture. So Sri Aurobindo wrote 400 pages, and brilliantly demonstrated how, Indian culture is so ancient and so vivid and so alive. And unfortunately, again, this is not taught in schools. But let me come back to cricket, because I'm very,
All right.
Cricket, there's nothing wrong with cricket, is right, nothing wrong with cricket, as long as cricket is played with other sports. But cricket in India has colonized the entire media attention.
Cricket is a new religion.
The entire media attention, the entire sponsorship attention, the entire, public attention, to the detriment of other sports, I mean, Indians, athletes, get no facilities. It's improving now, Indian swimmers, get no facilities. Everything is for cricket, and the amount of money that is made in cricket, is humongous. So again, that's one aspect of lack of nationalism. Why can't Indians play other sports? What's wrong with other sports?
So I think what has changed in last 5 years, right? If you look at Modi government, he brought Rathod as a sports look out, right?
Rajyavardhan Singh Rathod.
So he has actually, because he comes from archery, he comes from the military background, he was a serviceman. So he has changed a lot in that. Secondly, I think even the people have now with the social media, when they follow soccer outside or when they follow other sports, there is a little bit of other sports taking a little bit of attention.
Let's be positive tonight, okay? Positive.
See, Francois, the view that you are giving right now, and of course they are bitter for the Indians, my audience who would be watching right now, who are Indians. It's a little slapstick. It's straight on your face. But Francois has lived in India since 1971, has done a lot of research, written about, seen people very closely, traveled all throughout the country. Yes, there is a time one needs to introspect, and we as Indians, for us, the time has come to introspect who we are, what are our original origins. And if a person not born in the country is speaking so high about that and feeling the pain, I believe Indians need to rethink from that perspective.
I love India, I think India is a future superpower of the world, as long as, the right amount of nationalism comes, the major changes that happen, in terms of education, in terms of the constitution, in terms of politics, in terms of judiciary. I do think India has the potential to become, the greatest power in the world. But nationalism is needed.
Yeah, I think change in the education and the media narrative. These are the two very important things to bring.
I believe you should add politics also, or not?
I think politics is a byproduct, because when people think and they have a right, they will not vote for that party. See, politicians, wherever they get vote, they'll go for that. When we talked about patriotism, right? Or
Right.
when there is a terrorist attack, if the people unite and say that anybody who supports Tukde gang, we are not going to vote for you, those politicians will get sidelined automatically.
I think the
But
power.
your question was good, about the Bombay, when the Bombay attacks happened. I was in the Himalayas, and I really felt sad, the way India handled, this, how it took 24 hours for the special force
Absolutely.
to reach Bombay. I felt, really sad, sad, lack of national, lack of, readiness, fighting terrorism, whatever you can say about America, they want to get Bin Laden, Mr. Obama, I'm not talking about Mr. Trump. Mr. Obama wants to take Bin Laden responsible. This is the right amount of pride, that if I'm attacked, I strike back.
Yeah, you have to. You
This
have to
is
defend
correct
yourself.
nationalism. This is not, jingoism, it's correct, it's right. So
Agreed.
your question was good. It was a good question.
Thank you so much. I mean, my task is to ask the questions which are a little relevant, which can encourage people to think from a different level where they revisit themselves and think about what we are discussing today.
I want to add one
Dhirenji,
point
yes.
about the British, right? Whether
Sure.
they did, you asked about whether they did good to the country or not. I think they did a lot of damage to India. India, like Europe, fought so much. European countries were fighting among themselves. Germany with other countries, France with UK, etc. England and Scotland fought for centuries, but they came together. It would have happened for India. The fighting, they would have merged as a country. We didn't need outsider to do that. And what was India's GDP when Britishers came? Even Columbus came to this country searching for India because there was
Right.
a lot in India to milk.
Absolutely.
So India was a great power.
India was Sone ki chidiya, that's how they used to call
Britishers
it.
came for their own interest, and somebody whitewashed their excesses and their brutality by saying they did great. Nobody talks about Bengal famine and all that. So
Personally, there is no ground where I would say British
it's
did good
unfortunately
to
our,
India.
unfortunately our own
India
history
was
also.
a slave to British, and no
And our
Indian would
history
ever feel happy
and-
being a slave to anybody.
And our history continues to dilute their excesses. Our history still calls somebody like Bhagat Singh in many of the books as either militant or some derogatory manner. That's the worst thing that Nehru and his legacy
This
did.
is a
No,
misuse of politics.
no,
I
it's
must
not
say.
misuse of
This is
politics.
politicization has.
No, it is what
What do
he
you
said.
feel?
Nehru was friend of British, and I think that continued from there on.
So they are honoring a friend.
No, but and new media is a reflection of that lack of nationalism. New media looks at India with Western eyes.
Yeah. They want to
brilliantly,
get again,
NDTV is a brilliant TV. It's as good as many of the European TV, but it looks at India through the Western prism, not through an Indian prism. And this is also lack.
Well, coming
of
from
nationalism.
IT, I will give you an analogy. Most of the media people in Indian media are looking for on-site opportunity, right? And their on-site opportunity is either with New York Times, Washington Post, etc., etc.
Dhirenji,
So
I
they
think
want to get accepted by the Western media.
Lot of little you are extending it. It is little extrapolated though. I would
No, it's not.
not
It's
say
not.
anything.
You look at those who are writing derogatory articles in be it Bloomberg or be it Washington Post or be it New York Times. Most of them are Indian writers, Indian
No,
journalists.
I understand
so
that.
they are looking for on-site opportunity.
I understand that
Yeah.
opportunists do exist, and definitely we have discussed a lot about resurgence. Having Francois today in our panel discussion, where he has spoken about that Indians need to get up and do a self-reflection of themselves, analyze where they are heading to, and they really need to understand the truth that nationalism is missing somewhere. So they need to come back to the terms, to the reality, and accept and honor their pride, their culture, their ethnicity and everything. That's where I believe India will emerge as a better nation. That is what Francois' stance. And in one-line closures, what is the message you want to send out, Francois, to the Indian audience here who are watching us today?
So to the youth of India, not the one that is in India still, become proud to be Indian. It's great to be an Indian. It's not only you have a great history, but also you have a great future. So be proud to be an Indian. This is true nationalism.
Absolutely.
And it's up to the government to also teach in the schools and change the curriculum to make sure that some amount of pride of being Indian is instilled in the children. from the kindergarten till university, so that this talent stays in India, and makes India the great country that it deserves to be again.
Thank you so much,
My
Francois.
pleasure.
And Dhirenji, how would you like to close it?
So I think, as you mentioned, youth, right? I think that's because they are the future. So they need to, I think, get exposed to our heritage, not just heritage in terms of what Mughals did and what Britishers did, but go even beyond that. And during even Mughal Raj, what Shivaji did, what Maharana Pratap did, and others, and I think have that sense, and also study our culture, study our literature. They can learn English, that's fine, but they should also learn the language or native language and study the culture. Then you will feel proud about how vast and how deep our culture is, like he mentioned about Kalidasa. So I think it is needed, a balance is needed. We need to learn English and Western culture because we are a global society now, but just not that. We have to learn our own culture also. That only will bring the pride.
Thank you so much, Dhirenji. Thank you, Francois.
Thank you, my dear, for your good questions.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you like my questions, and we appreciate your presence here. And it's more about enlightening the people here who are watching us today. And it is a very straight message from Francois, from Dhiren Mehta. Indian people, whoever is watching, today. I mean, I am just a host to this show today. It was a discussion, and of course there were little differences of opinion still that came up in today's show. So the thing is, we are hosting this show sitting in New Jersey, in USA, and Francois did bring up the topic when he said, hey, why are you, me and Mr. Mehta are here in USA, leaving the country behind, and there is a brain drain that is happening. And of course there are some bitter facts to it, or say there are some influencing or say convincing reasons for people to move out in search of the opportunities and everything, and we may be one odd ones from that lot as well. Having said that, I would like to close on the fact that since I stay in USA, I have witnessed thousands and thousands of families here in USA who came from India. They tend to miss the nation very, very badly. For that reason, they are trying to inculcate the values of Indian culture and heritage in their kids. There are thousands of kids who go for their Arangetram classes. I mean to say, they go for their traditional Bharatnatyam sessions there. They learn traditional dances, languages, different kind of art and culture. This is prospering in USA, but they are Indians trying to keep their Matra Bhumis, Matra Bhasha and culture intact despite being away from their motherland, which I would definitely like to bring up in some other topic or some other session when we have a debate or a discussion. I would like to present some live examples of people, kids who are doing extremely well. When Francois speaks about spelling bee champions, there are kids who are enriching India's heritage right here in US soil, and they want to preserve it because their parents are very keen still preserving the national cultural heritage of India. So to the Indians who are watching from all across the world, I just want to convey, we are definitely benefited listening to Francois today. It is really a bitter truth today, but then if you really want to revisit your nationalism in the right spirit, your nation, our nation, India would be #1 in the world. On that note, thank you so much everyone. All the best, stay blessed, and this was the EVM special for today.